Expert, a web series designed to provide you with practical information on business and finance. I'm your host, Nicole Pride. I am super delighted to have with us today Alan Boomer, who is the founder and managing partner of Momentum Advisors, which is a certified minority-owned investment management and financial planning business based in New York City with over, get this, $330 million in assets under management. But that is not all. Listen to this about Mr. Boomer, because what I just said was worth applauding, but there's more. And I want to get this right. He and his partners own not one, not two, not three, but 9 zip cleaning franchise stores. They have 2 fitness gyms and several real estate investments. And so we want to know what is in his secret sauce that he's investing so much in these businesses. We want to get his wealth secrets today. So welcome, Alan. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me, Nicole. It's truly an honor to be here with you guys today. Just big shout out to you and all that you've accomplished. I love this platform. Big shout out to the D-Free movement, to Reverend Stories, and really everybody who's getting involved in this idea of building wealth and being debt-free.
Yeah. So, I mean, your background is just super impressive. So can we just kind of rewind a bit and start at the beginning, if you don't
Sure.
mind? So how did you get on this entrepreneurship trajectory?
Yeah. For me, it started a long, long time ago. I'm sorry. So for me, it started a really long, long time ago.
Hmm.
My very first time being an entrepreneur was in the 7th grade, selling blow pops at my locker. And, that kind of gave me the bug. I just saw that there was this new blue blow pop that came out and they didn't sell it at the local store, but I knew I could get it at Costco. And I asked my mom for $10. And I was able to give my mom back $10 and I was able to keep an extra 20 on top of that from the money I made from selling the blow pops. And that kind of put a bug in my ear. I didn't do entrepreneurship again until college. I got to college. I went to Morgan State University in Baltimore. And I knew how to cut my own hair. My dad used to cut my hair. And then he taught me how to cut my hair. And when I got to college, I brought my clippers. And I would always keep my hair looking nice. But I started to notice by week 2, week 3, a lot of brothers, they needed haircuts. And so I drew up a little flyer and I just hung it up in my dorm and said, hey, I cut hair, $5 a cut. I drew a picture of a guy getting his hair cut. And people started coming to my dorm room. And that's how I basically funded all of my, my party money, my play money in college. And then it just kind of went on. In college, I had a couple other entrepreneurial ventures. Like I was able to start a barbershop in college where I went to my dorm leader and said, hey, can we borrow this residence hall, this room in the residence hall? And I got all the barbers together from the whole building and we created a barbershop. And I had girls in there braiding hair. And we were doing one of my
What?
big specials was the kitchen cleanup committee back when girls had the short haircuts and we would do the back of their necks,
Wow.
and
Yeah.
that was my first time actually getting paid, not just for my own labor, but for the labor of other people as well,
Yeah.
because I got a little bit off the top. But we also gave some of the money to charity because I do think, one of the things about building wealth is that folks have to understand that money's not just for themselves. Like it's also for charity and philanthropy.
Man, so
So that's how it started, was back in the
yeah.
day.
But so you said a mouthful, which is great because the first thing I heard was how it started young, right? And I recall my son, he wanted to flip sneakers. I knew nothing about the sneaker
Mm,
culture. And he, in the 7th grade, wanted to sell sneakers. And we told him no. We found out that he did it anyway. And then he got in
mm.
trouble.
Listen,
But
sometimes you got to ask for forgiveness, not permission.
yeah. And so I'm saying to you parents out there, if you see the little inkling of entrepreneurship, don't squash it because later on we saw he begged enough and we allowed him, I think like a grade or 2 later, and he started flipping sneakers, I know
Hmm.
he made like $700 on a pair of sneakers before and it's great.
Yeah.
And then what I heard you say is you saw a need at your college, right? you saw brothers who needed to get their hair cut and you had
Yeah,
the
they were
skill.
wolfing out there.
So yeah, I think that's pretty cool. You were able to identify a need and you knew you had the skill set to supply that need. And but pretty impressive in the collaboration you did with everyone to
Yeah,
create your own salon. Like that's
thank you.
pretty,
I mean,
yeah.
calling it a salon is quite generous, but uh, what I'll say is this: like entrepreneurship is so simple, and I think people overcomplicate it. Right? Like I remember studying entrepreneurship. I in my master's program and in my undergrad program, I studied entrepreneurship. And the first thing they talk to you about is writing a business plan. And then they talk about getting investors and like registering your LLC and all of these things. And they're hurdles, right? Like I didn't have a business plan for selling blow pops or for launching Momentum Advisors years later. I
Mhm,
met a guy one time when I was in business school, and it was a white guy, and he came to my class and he described his business. He had a furniture business.
mhm,
And he said that his business was grossing over $57 million per year. And I raised my hand and I said, "Hey, what was your business plan like?"
mhm,
He laughed. He was like, "I didn't write a business plan. I wrote my ideas down on the back of a piece of paper
mhm.
and I went out and I did it." And I think that's the thing that I want folks to take away from this is that entrepreneurship doesn't have to be inventing the next Google. It doesn't have to be, something that requires investment. It doesn't investment of dollars. It could be, of course, investment of time and effort.
Mhm.
And it doesn't have to be something that requires a whole lot of advanced planning. Like I think you need to have an idea in mind, but the biggest thing you need is three things. You need something that people need, whether it be a product or a service.
Mhm.
You need something that they're willing to pay for. Like that's a big thing. You got to
Yeah,
get paid. And then finally, you got to be able to deliver the product or service at a price where you can make a profit,
right.
right? And
That's
that's
the key,
probably one of
right?
the hardest things about entrepreneurship is coming up with that right price. I'll tell you a funny story about like your son selling the sneakers. So my nephew also sold sneakers.
Mhm,
But what he was doing was he would get his parents to buy him the sneakers, let's say for $100,
mhm.
and then he was selling them for 50. And he's thinking to himself, well, I just made $50. Like, nah, bro, like you actually lost money. Like your household lost money in that transaction. So, like that idea of price is really, really important with entrepreneurship.
Right, right, right. Well, yeah, that's very key, right? Because I believe I think I heard you say on one of your episodes, if you're not making money, then it's a hobby, right?
Word. I hate to
Yeah,
say it.
I
So
know.
I
Ouch,
often
that
ask
hurts, right?
kids, like, I say, kid, like when I speak to kids, I say, what's the one thing that you need to have a business? Like to say that you're in business, you need this one thing. If you don't have this one thing, then you don't have a business. And often the adults raise their hands first and they're like, you need, a business plan, you need an office, you need a website, you need a business
Mm-hmm.
card, you need an
Mm-hmm.
LLC. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
nah. And then the kids raise their hands. You need determination. You need pride. I'm like, yo, those are all really nice things to have. But if you don't have this one single thing, you don't have a business. And that's customers.
Mm-hmm.
If you've
Mm-hmm.
got customers, you've got a business.
Right,
Because like
right.
notice that like if you drive through your town, how many different restaurants do you see sitting across the street from each other or next to each other? How many accounting offices do you see? How many doctor's offices do you see? These
Mm-hmm.
are all businesses and they're all sitting right next to each other. And,
Mm-hmm.
and so, what I'm getting at is like, we don't have to have the most innovative business. We
Mm-hmm.
don't have the newest business. We don't have to be the first to ever do it or the only one who's doing it. It doesn't
Right,
have to be innovative. It just needs to have customers. And
right.
if
The
you can figure out
demand.
how to get those customers to pay you money at a price where you can make a profit, then you're in business.
All right. All right. So one thing that I found interesting was again, you started your investment firm and then you have all of these other businesses. How did you go from a single business to having multiple businesses? What was the mindset like to do that? And then what did you have to shift in the way that you operated to go from a singular focus to multiple entities that you're managing?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, number one, you've got to have a some people around you. Like if I were by myself, I certainly could not do any of these things. I mean, for one, I got God, right? And
Mm,
God is my inspiration. He gives me the strength that I need to go out and do anything.
mm,
But for two, you've got to have people around you who can help you carry the load. Like I have a really amazing business partner named Tiffany, and she has given me, I'm going to say uh, the skill set that I don't have. Like she's rounded out my skills, but also given me the capacity to go out and do more. But
mhm,
it started like randomly. Like I run a wealth management firm. That is my day job. And I had a client who was retiring from the NFL, and he, through a lot of careful planning, had no financial worries at all. Like we had worked to make sure that his home was paid for, his mom's home was paid for, there were no mortgages. We had trust accounts for his kids. We
mm,
really had it going on from a financial planning perspective. But this was a guy who was in his early 30s with millions of dollars in the bank.
mhm,
And every day he was waking up depressed because he didn't have any identity. He didn't have anything to do. And so
mhm,
what started to happen was he was sending me all these different business plans, and he's saying, "Hey, this person wants me to invest or that person wants me to invest." And every time the business plan looked the same to me, it was, you put up all the money, but we're going to be the ones in control of the business and we'll
mm,
tell you how it goes. And I
mm,
said, that doesn't feel right to me. Like you've earned this money. You clearly have to make it as a pro athlete for 9 years. Why don't we come up with a different way to go out and do business? And why don't we find a franchise investment that you can get into? The reason I suggested franchising to him is that franchising is the opportunity to take your money and mix it with somebody else's idea, someone else's blueprint, someone else's game plan. And also you don't have to make the mistakes that they made in the past. Like you get
right,
to come in with a not a free ride, but a chance to come in and not have to pay for those same mistakes.
right,
And
mhm,
so I helped him to create a business that was a franchise. It was called Retro Fitness,
mm,
and it's a gym. And we picked gyms because for him, it was the thing that he was passionate about. It was fitness. And after we got the business up and running, he turned to me and said, "Hey, Alan, like this is great, but like I don't know how to run a business. Can you help me?"
mm,
And I said, "Well, look, I can help you, but don't pay me a fee. I want you to give me a piece of the equity of the business."
mhm,
And that was my first time being an owner in an additional business outside of the one that paid my bills.
right,
And over time, we did it again with other clients. And by the time it was all said and done on the gym side, we had 5 locations. I
wow,
had 3 different investors, and for actually 4 different investors. And for one of the locations, me and my dad decided to put our money up, and
mm,
we bought that location. And as you're doing this, as you're running these businesses, you're starting to realize like, yo, this is actually pretty cool. Like I
mm,
can be sitting here doing my day job, but over here, I've got money coming in that I don't have to touch. And that's part of being wealthy, is having money that's coming into your household that you don't have to go out and touch to bring it in. And so
mm.
that's what got me excited about that. And that's how I got started with these other businesses.
So it sounds like that you do find owning a gym is lucrative. Are there particular categories or industries in terms of franchise businesses that you lean toward and think that are worth the investment?
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I'll say is this: like, I've gotten out of the gym business for the most part. I'm still a partner in one gym. COVID really kind of messed up that
Wow.
industry,
Mm-hmm.
but it messed it up for the big box gym owner.
Mm-hmm.
It created a new set of opportunities for the boutique gym owner,
Mm-hmm.
or for the person who's a personal trainer who can train people online or in small groups at a park or at a really small studio. So I
Mm-hmm.
think it just changed the dynamic of the gym industry. I'm no longer a big investor in the gym industry. I've kind of transitioned into dry cleaning, but I will say this, like, you know, any business that you understand really well is something that you can make money in.
Okay.
Um, Gyms happen to be something that we made money in, but dry cleaning is something I knew nothing about, and we're making a lot of money in dry cleaning. So I wouldn't say that there's like a secret industry that everyone needs to be in. Like for
Mm-hmm.
example, I met a guy down in Atlanta. I had parked my car in a parking lot where they put a boot on my car.
Oh man.
And I was so mad. I paid the ticket. I got the boot off. And then the next day,
Oh
my
no.
dumb butt parked in the same lot and got a boot again. And now
Oh
this time
boy.
I'm mad. I'm like, look, I need to see who's in charge of this. Y'all just not gonna be putting all these boots on my car. And so I met with this guy, and he was a young black guy, he was an African guy. He was like my age, though. He was in his 30s. And he's like, I'm like, dude, how did you come to own this giant parking lot right in the center of downtown in Midtown
Mm-hmm.
Atlanta?
Mm-hmm.
And he said to me, well, I happen to own the second largest valet car parking business in Atlanta.
Wow.
I'm like, valet car, how'd you get into that? So you mean like when I pull up to a restaurant and I go to give the guy my keys, your company is the one parking the cars? He's like, yeah, that's the type of work that I do. And my company's the second largest. And I'm like, how did you land on that? Like, that's something I never would have thought of.
Random,
He's
right?
like, well, I used to be the guy parking the car.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And you see what I'm getting at? So
Yeah.
he basically was parking the car
Mm-hmm.
and he realized I could do this myself. He went to some of the customers that he was working for, some of the restaurants, and said, hey, look, we've got a good relationship. If I left this company and started my own, give me an opportunity for a contract. And they said yes. And then
Wow.
he got the next one and the next one. And now he's done so well, he was able to branch off and now own this parking lot. And he's making money in multiple different ways. And then I hate to beat this dead horse, but like he then introduced me to his homeboy.
Mm-hmm.
His homeboy had the second largest black car service in the city of Atlanta. Like
Mm-hmm.
they pick you up at the airport and
Yeah.
whatnot. This is
Mm-hmm.
before Uber,
Yeah.
before Lyft, right? This is in the early 2000s. And I'm like, how did you come to own the second largest valet? I mean, sorry, how did you come to the second largest, black car service in Atlanta?
Mm-hmm.
He's like, I used to be the guy driving the car.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same story. What I'm getting at with entrepreneurship, it's just seeing an opportunity in something that you understand.
Right. 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 And believing in yourself, right? That you can do it.
Yeah, you got to
Yeah.
take some chances.
Got to take some chances. Mm-hmm. So tell us because our theme for this month is having a CEO mindset, think like a
Mm,
boss. What are
yeah.
some of the characteristics or mindsets that you think is important when you're leading your own business?
So number one, you cannot be, well, I would say you cannot be afraid, but like sometimes you got to do it scared. Like sometimes you got to do it anyway,
Mm,
right? What you can't do is quit.
mm,
Sometimes the smartest thing you can do is just keep going.
keep pushing.
So that's number one.
Hmm.
Number two, I think you've got to be willing to recognize that you're competing in a marketplace and the marketplace is going to speak and the marketplace speaks with money, right? And if
Hmm.
you're doing everything that you think you're supposed to be doing, but the money's not coming in, then you're not doing something right.
Hmm.
You might think that your client base should be over here, but if you
Hmm.
keep getting clients from on this side, then maybe that's where you're supposed to be,
Hmm.
right? So you've got to be willing to understand that market dynamic, be willing to pivot, and be willing to accept that the business that I end up with may not be the business that I had in mind.
Right, right, right.
The
I,
final thing I'll say is leadership. Like you've got to be a people person if you're going to be a CEO. Like meaning like when I was a one-man shop and I was a one-man shop for a long time, literally sitting in my mom's basement running my wealth management firm in the first year.
mm,
And I will tell you that things did not really take off for me until I was able to start hiring people. And
mm,
when I hired people, I trained them on how to do business, but I also gave them the confidence to know that they could be greater than who they are right now. And
mhm,
I told them how much I believed in them. And I showed them how to do business, but I gave them the room to go out and build their own business.
mhm,
And in doing so, my business took off. Like in my first year, we were managing about $26 million. And you gave the number earlier. We're now managing well over $300 million.
yeah,
And we have, hundreds of clients all over the country.
mhm,
We employ about 10 people at the firm. But what I'm getting at about leadership is that it's getting things done through other people is what really makes you a CEO. Like
Mm-hmm.
running your own business, being your own person. Sure, you got to manage yourself, and that's very difficult. But if you really want your business to grow, you're going to need to do it with other people, and you've got to be able to lead those people. And leading is its own, show. Like we could do a whole
Right.
show on leadership, but
Yeah.
like my method of leadership is through inspiration.
Yeah.
Some lead through example, some lead through other mechanisms. But for me, I try to inspire people to know that they can be a whole lot better than they might think that they could be, that there's more in store for them than they might have even ever realized, and to try to open their eyes to those possibilities.
Yeah, that's so awesome because some people they lead really with the short leash, right? And they micromanage and they don't allow their team to do what it is that they hired them to do and they hurt the business, you know? And so giving people that creative room to really operate in their own power and their skills sounds like that it works for you.
Yeah, I mean, part of leadership is this. Like, if I ask you to do something, right? And think about like when you ask your kids to do something and you want it done a certain way. Like, I want you to go in there and I want you to make the bed and I want you to do it the way I taught you. That may work as a parent. That doesn't necessarily work as a leader in a business.
Mhm.
Like, when you give someone a task, you have to accept that they're going to do it their own way.
Mhm.
And as long as it gets done, you got to be good with the outcome,
Mm,
even though it might not be exactly the way that you wanted it done.
mm. Okay, that's great advice. And the other thing that you talked about was there was something you just said that I wanted to go back to that was so important. Oh, I think a lot of people fall into the trap of being so married to their initial vision. You
Hmm.
talked about listening to the market and going where the customers are and being able to be flexible enough to shift your business, and I think that there's such a personal attachment, to a lot of people's businesses. It's their baby,
Hmm.
that they find it hard to let go of that initial vision to the detriment of their business.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, you nailed it. You
Mm-hmm.
nailed it.
Mm-hmm.
Like I just think the market speaks and you got to ask yourself if you're listening or not.
Mm.
And it really speaks in dollars. Like when I started Momentum Advisors, like I thought that we were going to be a firm that only dealt with I came from Goldman Sachs. To have an account at Goldman Sachs, you needed about $10 million. And I knew when starting my own business that I needed to lower that sum, but I thought we were only going to cover, folks that had maybe not 10 million, but maybe 5 million or 2 million. But we started getting a lot of interest from folks that had $1 million, a $500,000. And we ended up saying, well, if that's where the opportunity is, let's figure out how to build a business that focuses on folks at a wider range of asset values than I ever first expected. And what I learned about that is that there's value in those accounts that I never thought about before,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, meaning in my business, if I can grab an account or if I can land an account from a family that has a $500,000, maybe they know two or three other people with a similar amount of money.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe they're still young and they're adding to their accounts every month. And
Mm-hmm.
maybe that's actually even more valuable than the person who played football and has $5 million, but they're spending it down, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so what I'm getting at is like there's sometimes beauty in the part of the business that you didn't expect to be there,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I didn't expect that that was going to be good business, but I did know that I wanted to help people. And like that was the one thing that was common in whether it was the person with $2 million or the person with $300,000. And, I wanted to make sure that I was helping people. And that's one of the reasons why, like, we've got a podcast, the Momentum Advisors podcast that you highlighted earlier. We just want to help people. And like, whether the business works out exactly how you had it in mind,
Yeah.
I think you got to to your guiding principle. Like, what made you want to
Mm-hmm.
be in this business to begin with,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I think about a lot of folks who, want to start a restaurant. And well, what is it about the restaurant that you really want? And if you really boil it down, maybe they just enjoy cooking and they like sharing it with people. Okay, well, if that's really what matters to you, then maybe you'd get that same joy from delivering plates to people, and having just a delivery restaurant instead of a sit down restaurant that costs a lot of money. Meaning there's a lot of different ways to get to your goal, be true to the vision that you've had, true reason you wanted to start a business, but the way you execute it might be different than what you had in mind.
How often do you reevaluate, your goals and your vision and what you're doing? Do you do that like once a year, quarterly? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, I think it's important for entrepreneurs to like every now and then,
Mhm,
like sit back and look at what they've accomplished and really give themselves a chance to feel proud.
mhm,
Often it's like you're just going for the next deal, the
mhm,
next contract, the next customer, and you're sprinting. And as soon as you land that customer, you're now worried about, oh, well, now I got to fulfill the contract. And
mhm,
you never took the chance to really celebrate. And
mhm,
so I think it's important at least once a year, if not once a quarter, to just look back on what you've done and just give yourself a pat on the back. Every day you should be giving God the praise, but
mhm,
also you should be giving yourself the praise sometimes as well. Just saying,
mhm,
look, I did that. I
mhm,
built this. Like I did this. I was able to take my business from here to there. Like I was looking at your site, Nicole, and you were talking about some of the people who you've helped along their journey.
mhm.
And despite what age they were, you help them to get to a point to do something that they never thought was possible. And I hope you've taken the time to thank yourself and to pat yourself on the back. And so that is one of those moments where you can kind of reassess how you want to do things moving forward. But it starts better if you can start from a position of, you know what, I'm proud of what I've already done.
Well, I first of all, thank you for those comments. I appreciate that. And I know that's something that I struggle with personally. I do not take the time to celebrate the wins, right? And so I've noticed that about myself, even in my leadership style too, and really have to make conscious, deliberate decisions for when I work on teams to celebrate folks to do things special to just recognize the goals that we just made and that type of thing. So it is definitely something I do have to work at, and I'm sure a lot of people as well. One thing I want to ask is when you talked about, being in your mother's basement and then eventually hiring who's your one of your partners now, and she compliments you because she has a skill set that maybe skill sets that you don't have, and it works out really nicely. But what was your deciding factors in terms of to grow your business, grow your team and human capital? Like, what were some of the things that people should consider when it's the right time?
Yeah, I think it's partnership is great, but it also doesn't always work out. And I've always been a team person. Like my favorite experiences as a kid was playing team sports. Like I ran track in high school, and I loved the relay way better than I love the individual races. And so I think you first have to ask yourself, are you a team person? Because not everybody's a team person. Like I have a brother, I love my brother to death. My brother he works better alone a lot of times. I'm not saying he's not good in teams. I'm not saying he doesn't like to have people around, but I'm saying he often does his best work by himself.
Mhm.
And so you've got to ask yourself, do I really is it a headache? Is it a burden to have people around me? Will
Mhm.
they slow me down? You know what I'm saying? Like there's always that phrase, if you want to go far, there's always that phrase, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together, go with a team. But not everybody is built that way. Not everybody is a team person. So that's the first question you got to ask yourself. The second thing you got to really do is like be really honest with yourself. Like, what am I not good at?
Mhm.
And sometimes you don't know it
Mhm.
until you see it in somebody else. And you're like, oh, snap. Like that person's actually bomb at that. And what's crazy, so my partner Tiffany, like she came on board after we built our first gym and we actually bought our second gym. And we were pouring all this money into this gym and it just wasn't working out. And I met this woman and she was running her own company. And the thing that her company was doing was strategy and marketing. And I said, hey, can I hire you to just look at this business and tell me what I need to do marketing wise?
Mhm.
And she went to the business. She spent a day there And she said, "Oh, your problem has nothing to do with marketing." I'm like, what do you mean? Like, I figure I just need to advertise better and like
Mhm.
people will come. She's like, no, your business sucks. You got to change this. You got to change that. And she was right.
Mhm.
We had to get some new employees. We had to do retraining. We had to paint. We had to fix some stuff. So what
Mhm.
I'm getting at is like sometimes you've got blinders on. And so
Mhm.
you've got to be open to seeing that somebody else has a skill set that maybe you don't have. Someone might have a perspective that you don't have. And you got to be, I'm saying, like confident enough to be able to receive that constructive feedback. Like
Mhm.
often, like people give us constructive feedback and we think they're hating on us. We think they're trying to take us down or they're just jealous. But really, like that constructive feedback is very valuable and it can really change your life. It can certainly change your business.
Mhm. Wow, that's awesome. So, what is it that you would advise folks who are in their startup phase? Is there one or two key things that they should consider?
Yeah, I'd say this, like number one, figure out how you can get some customers as soon as possible.
Mhm.
Number two, figure out the best way to fund your business. And it's not investors, it's not debt, it's revenue. Like I'm telling you, like it's beautiful to fund your business with revenue, with sales,
Yeah.
because what that does two things. Number one, it's money that you don't have to pay back,
Yeah.
right? Like if somebody writes you an equity check or if somebody gives you a
Mhm.
loan, guess what they want?
I know. Yeah.
They want that money back. If
Mhm.
somebody buys your product or your service, they just want their product or service and they're good.
Mhm.
It's
Mhm.
a no strings attached form of funding that nobody's talking about.
Right. I don't think people think of it that way, so I think that's interesting.
Word.
Yeah.
Thing is like people who are starting businesses, right? I think we got to just make it simpler.
Mhm.
What can I do right now with the resources that God gave me right here and now
Mhm.
to get money coming in the door?
Mhm.
Like people often create these hurdles. Well, if I could just get $100,000 investment, or if I could just get this website built, if I could just think of this name of this company,
Mhm.
I will be, but at the end of the day, none of that stuff matters.
Mhm.
What matters is that you've got customers who believe in your product or service enough or who need your product or service enough that they're willing to pay. So not only is it a validation that your business is on track,
Right.
it's also a cheap, cheap, cheap source of funding. Because I
Mm.
will tell you this, like people glorify Shark Tank, right?
Yeah.
Equity investment is the most expensive way to fund your business.
Mm.
It is
Mm.
expensive to take on investors. My first time starting Momentum, I made a mistake. I brought in an investor, and this guy invested $100,000 in Momentum, and I gave him half the business. He owned half, I owned half.
Wow.
In order for me to buy him out,
Mhm.
guess how much I had to pay him to get him out of the company, Nicole?
How
Just guess.
much? I don't know how
Just
much.
guess. He put in 100K. What do you think I
Uh-huh.
paid him to get out?
Uh, half of it.
400K.
Mhm.
He gave me $1. I gave him $4 back to get
Mhm.
out, to get my own company back that I started in my basement. Like I wish I had not taken on that investor. Right.
Mm.
Right now, I learned, look, I had to do it again. And if I didn't have the money, I borrowed the money. Yeah, I paid a little bit of interest. But a lot of times we got the money and don't realize it. I actually had the money, Nicole. I didn't even need the money. The
Mm.
money was sitting in my 401k from my old job. And I
Mhm.
didn't know that there's this thing called a rollover as a business startup, ROBS, where you can actually create a business, create a 401k plan for that business, roll over your old 401k into the business 401k, and then elect as an employee to invest in employer stock, which
Mm.
moves the money from your retirement account into your corporate checking account. And what I'm getting at, I know I'm getting into some hardcore finance and it's technical. Look this thing up. What I'm getting at is like a lot of times we have access to the money and don't know how to access it. Like I was able to
Yeah.
when it was time for me to buy them out, I had to do that. Like I had to do this rollover thing. I had to use my own money to pay them back, plus profits from the business. And what I'm getting at is like, we need to first think about what we have right now and try to make the most of that. When I did that rollover transaction, it didn't cost me any taxes. There was no penalties, right? Like I really just
Right.
had to structure my own capital in that way. So
Wow.
imagine if like three people want to be in business together, right? What if each person took some money
Yeah.
from their 401k, their job,
Mm-hmm.
or an old IRA? Like, we're in our 40s,
Watch yourself
years
now.
old,
Watch
right?
yourself.
Like a
Uh,
lot of times folks have a little bit of coin saved up.
yeah.
Why not
Yeah.
get a couple folks together and pool some money together to start that business?
Yeah.
But again, like I often would rather start with no money. Like Momentum Advisors truly, like if I had to go back, like I really think about the amount of money it truly required to start the business. It was about $7,000 or $8,000.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I went out and got 100,000 investor because I felt like I needed to have a salary. Right. And all that money just went in my pocket to just, help me pay my bills. Right. But really what it cost to start the business was about $7,000. Like
Mm-hmm.
often businesses don't cost a lot to start.
Mm-hmm.
It's your lifestyle might cost a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so a lot of times you're looking for investors to fund that, but it's very expensive to do it that way.
Mhm. And so say the name of the 401k strategy to fund your business so
Sure, it's
people have
called
that.
rollover as a business startup.
A
If you just
business
Google
startup. Yeah.
ROBS, it's again a way to access your old 401k or your IRA in the business without generating any taxes, any penalties,
Right. That's the
things like that.
key. Yeah. Awesome. Good one. Thank you. So, okay, so this is so helpful. I mean, you've given us a lot to think about, and I know that people are taking notes like crazy. So, before we end our conversation, is there anything that you want to reiterate? I know you've done so much already, but is there
Sure,
final
sure. I mean,
words?
look, I'm speaking to now the aspiring entrepreneur, the person who's right at the cusp of making that decision.
Mm.
The thing I want you to know is that you've been lied to your whole life. People have told you that entrepreneurship is risky. People have told you that working a full-time job is the safe bet. They've also told you that entrepreneurship it requires a vow of poverty in the beginning. They've told you
Lord.
that, yeah, they've just lied to you. Entrepreneurship is the safest thing I've ever done because I used to have one boss, and that one boss used to give me agita. Like I used to lose sleep because if my boss didn't like me, if the company, which I had no control over, wasn't doing well,
Mm,
my whole livelihood was at stake.
mm,
Running my own business and in the service business, I have hundreds of bosses now. And if one of my bosses doesn't like me, it's not good, but I'm going to still have a business. And so I
mm,
went from having one boss to having a lot of bosses, which is a lot more diversified, a lot safer. I'm making today more money than I made working in corporate America.
mm,
I'm
mm.
able to pay for, my own health insurance. Like a lot of times people are like, I gotta stay at the big company because I need health insurance. Like, I don't
Right.
know if you know,
I heard
they
that.
selling health insurance out here. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
thanks to Obama, like we can all go out and buy our own healthcare coverage. Like we don't need to be at a company to do that. The final thing I'll say is like, look, you don't have to just do it as a side hustle. Entrepreneurship can be your full-time thing. And I think the way you start the business is the way it's going to end, right? The way it's going to go. Like what you have in mind, what you manifest is what's going to come true. So if you go into something saying, I want this to be my little thing on the side, then guess what it's going to be?
Mm,
If you go into something with your intention that this can be a great business, something that will last multiple generations. Like when I started my company, I didn't have a big vision, but I did know that I needed to feed my family. And I
mm,
did hope that I would be able to grow it to be something that I could be proud of in the future. You asked about pivoting later. Like I pivoted recently and I said, I want Momentum Advisors to be a home for Black and brown and female financial advisors for the next 100 years.
Mm.
Right? Like that's the vision that I now have. Like I want my firm to be around for 100 years, to be a home for that professional that has not been able to find a home on Wall Street or in financial
Mm.
services. Right. And
Mm.
so my vision is a lot bigger now. And it's more than about me and the money I make. It's more about the impact I can have on the world. Right. And so what I'm getting at is like, we've got to have that kind of vision behind the business plans that we have. Because when I think back about my life and I ask myself, what would I do differently if I could do it all over again? The biggest thing I would do differently is just dream even bigger.
Mm-hmm.
Because God has already said that you can do all things through Christ who strengthens him,
Mm-hmm.
who strengthens you. God's already said you can do all things through Christ who strengthens you.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't say you could do some of the things.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't say you could do the things you're qualified for.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't say you could do some things on the side. It said all things.
Mm-hmm.
So why do we then doubt ourselves? Why do we then go into careers that we're not passionate about? Why do we then try to put our little thing on the side when God already told you that you could do all of it? And I want all of it for myself, but I definitely want all of it. You got to speak it, know that it's possible. And
Mm-hmm.
that's the thing that I would leave with everybody who's aspiring to be an entrepreneur today, that it is possible and it could be way greater than you ever imagined. But you got to give it out up to God, and you got to let him plus your own effort make it all happen for yourself.
Yes. All right. Well, amen to that. Thank you. Thank you. Keep us posted about your big vision of being the home for Black and brown women advisors. If there is some type of structure that you have in place to grow that and to bring people on, we'd love to let people know about that process when you're ready.
For sure. I mean, look, our website is momentum-advisors.com. We're
Mhm.
always looking for new clients, but also new advisors. If you are
Mhm.
a financial advisor or know of a financial advisor who is looking for a new home, hey, come to Death Row. If you don't want your advisor all in the video,
Well, thank you so much for your energy, your expertise. It was just great. So we just so appreciate you taking time out to chat with us today. And so there you have it, folks. That is this edition of Ask the Expert. We'll see you next week, same time, same place. Bye.